The Me-410's Daimler-Benz engines droned steady at 20,000 feet. Oberleutnant Klaus Becker adjusted his oxygen mask, tasting rubber and cold sweat. Below, Dover Harbor stretched like a map made real. Too real. The English Channel glittered. And there, impossible to miss, even from 4 miles up, sat the largest invasion fleet he'd ever seen. His gloved hand worked the camera mount. Click. The landing craft first. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, lined up in neat rows like factory goods. Click transport ships next, their hulls dark against the water. Click. The tank formations on the docks, Shermans clustered so thick he lost count. The fuel depot caught sunlight. Massive cylindrical tanks, at least 20 of them, each one capable of feeding an armored division. Becker's heart hammered against his ribs. This is it. This is where they'll come. He banked left for another pass, the Me-410 responding smooth despite the weight of cameras and the thin air. Dover Castle slid into frame. More tanks below it. Supply dumps spreading inland like infection. The mathematics made his stomach tight. This wasn't a raid, wasn't a reconnaissance in force. This was invasion. The real thing. The blow that would crack open France. His wingman's voice crackled over the radio. Busy down there. Photograph everything, Becker said. His voice sounded strange in his own ears. Everything. What Becker couldn't see, what no pilot could see from 20,000 feet where flak couldn't reach, was the canvas, the plywood, the inflatable rubber holding shape in the April wind. 3 miles inland, Sergeant Jack Morrison knelt in muddy grass, bicycle pump in hand. The Sherman took shape in front of him like a magic trick performed in reverse. His team held the corners taut while compressed air filled the internal bladder. 15 minutes from flat canvas to what looked, from any distance beyond 50 yards, like 30 tons of American armor. Wet Bob's looking good, Morrison said, stepping back. The tank sat there, shadows falling correctly across the turret, the barrel angled at precisely the right declination. The pneumatic frame inside held everything rigid. From Becker's altitude, this inflatable fake would photograph identical to the real Shermans at Portsmouth. Morrison's crew chief, a former set designer from Warner Brothers, adjusted the rubber tracks. Think they're buying it? Jerry Recon passed over 20 minutes ago, Morrison said, squinting at the sky. Either he's buying it or he's got a hell of a poker face. They'd built 68 rubber tanks in this sector alone. Plywood landing craft bobbed in Dover Harbor. No engines, no crew quarters, just convincing silhouettes that moved with the tide. The fuel tanks were Morrison's favorite piece of theater. Canvas stretched over scaffolding, painted to show weathering and rust, with actual petroleum smell pumped through vents to sell the illusion to any German agent close enough to sniff. The whole invasion fleet threatening Becker's peace of mind weighed less than a single actual destroyer. Becker landed at Abbeville 2 hours later, his flight suit soaked with sweat despite the cold. The ground crew read his face. He didn't have to say anything. They rushed the film canisters to intelligence. The developing room smelled like chemicals and cigarettes. Becker stood over the technician's shoulder, watching Dover emerge in the chemical bath. First one image, then another. Each photograph confirmed what his eyes had told him. God in heaven, the technician whispered. The landing craft were there. The transports, the tanks in their perfect formations. The fuel depot catching afternoon light. Becker counted ships until the numbers blurred. Hundreds of vessels. Maybe more. The photographs didn't lie. Couldn't lie. The Leica camera was German precision. The film, German quality. The clarity, absolute. The intelligence officer, a major whose name Becker never learned, spread the wet prints across a table. His fingers trembled slightly. This is Dover. Dover Harbor and 3 miles inland. Becker pointed to specific frames. Landing craft here, here, and massed along this dock. Sherman's in depot formation. Fuel storage here. I count at least 20 tanks. possibly more obscured by these buildings. The Major's jaw worked. When? Taken at 1400 hours. Clear conditions. No cloud cover. They're not even hiding it. The Major's voice carried something Becker couldn't quite identify. Not fear exactly. Something worse. They want us to see this. A captain entered, boots clicking on concrete. Analysis? Dover is the staging point, the Major said, straightening. Has to be. Shortest route across the channel. Dover to Calais, 32 kilometers. They're assembling everything in plain sight because they know we know the mathematics. This is where they'll come. Becker felt it then. A cold thread of something running down his spine. The photograph sat before him. Undeniable evidence. Dover to Calais. The shortest route. The obvious route. The route any competent commander would choose. So why did his hands still shake? We'll need to brief the general staff, the captain said, gathering the prints. These go directly to Wehrmacht intelligence. This is confirmation of what the agents have been reporting. Patton's forces massing for Pas-de-Calais. Becker nodded. The agents. Yes, everything aligned. The photographs, the agent reports, the simple geography. Dover to Calais. Of course. But flying back, alone in the cockpit at 20,000 feet, he'd felt something. A wrongness he couldn't articulate. The fleet was too perfect, too visible. The Americans were many things, but they weren't stupid enough to stage an invasion in the most photographed harbor in England. Were they? He watched the captain leave with the photographs, taking them toward German high command, toward the analysts who would study every detail, toward the generals who would shift divisions north to defend Calais against the coming assault. The developing room door closed. Becker stood alone, looking at the last remaining print drying on the rack. A Sherman in perfect profile, turret traversed 15 degrees left. Shadows falling exactly right. His chest felt tight. Not fear of invasion. He'd prepared for that, accepted it. Something else. Something like the feeling before a storm, when the air pressure changes and birds go silent. He was looking at shadows. He knew it somewhere deeper than thought, deeper than analysis. But the photograph in his hands showed a tank. Dover showed a fleet. The intelligence showed Patton. Becker folded the print carefully and placed it in his flight bag. Evidence, proof the invasion was coming at Calais, and he'd photographed the fleet that would carry it. He walked out into French sunlight, and 30 miles north, German reinforcements were already moving toward Pas-de-Calais, defending against an army that didn't exist, against tanks that would deflate in a strong wind, against ships that would sink if they ever touched actual water. The first crack in German certainty had opened. Becker felt it without understanding it. A fault line running beneath everything solid, everything known. The photographs were real. The intelligence was consistent. The logic was flawless. And somewhere, somehow, it was all wrong. The safe house smelled wrong. Stale cigarette smoke layered over boiled cabbage. Damp plaster. The faint chemical tang of carbon paper. Juan Pujol Garcia sat at a rickety table in the Hendon flat. May 1944. Fingers poised over typewriter keys. The machine's black bulk solid under his hands. Outside, London traffic hummed through blacked-out streets. Inside, he was building a lie that would reshape the Western Front. The report forming under his fingertips came from Agent 43, a fictional American sergeant stationed in Kent, one of 27 non-existent people in Garbo's network. Garcia had invented them all. The Venezuelan student in Glasgow, the Welsh nationalist in Swansea, the NAFI waiter in Brighton. Each had a backstory, personality quirks, political grievances. The Germans paid him for their reports, paid handsomely. The Abwehr trusted his network more than their own reconnaissance. He typed another line. Observed insignia, 1st U.S. Army Group in concentration near Dover. American 28th Infantry Division conducting embarkation exercises. All fiction. Perfect, documentary detailed fiction. In the corner, his MI5 handler, Tommy Harris, smoked and watched. Harris never interrupted during composition. Garcia worked best alone with his cast of ghosts, inhabited each fictional agent completely when writing their reports. Agent 43 was ambitious, slightly mercenary, resentful of British command. Traits that made his intelligence seem authentic, hard-won, grudgingly provided. The kind of source who might exaggerate numbers to justify his payment, which paradoxically made Germans trust him more. They corrected for inflation, never suspecting the entire foundation was sand. Garcia pulled the page free, carbon copy underneath, leaving purple smudges on his fingers. He scanned his own work critically. The detail had to be perfect. Unit designations, equipment types, officer names. Too vague, and it seemed fabricated. Too specific, and it seemed impossible for a sergeant to know. He walked a knife's edge every message, and in 3 years of reporting, he'd never slipped. The truth that made this moment devastating: Garcia had tried to become a German spy because he hated fascism. When the Abwehr initially rejected him in Madrid, he invented an entire espionage network in Britain, from Portugal, never having set foot in England, sending reports compiled from newsreels, library books, and train timetables. The fiction was so convincing that British intelligence noticed someone feeding Germany elaborate lies about Britain and tracked him down. By the time MI5 found him, the Germans already trusted him completely. Now he sat in actual London, running an actual deception operation, feeding intelligence so accurate in texture and tone that Abwehr handlers in Madrid cited his reports to their superiors as unimpeachable. "The bit about Patton?" Harris asked, tapping Ash. "They'll love that." Garcia nodded. 2 weeks earlier, Agent 43 had spotted General George S. Patton inspecting troops in Dover, which was true. Patton had made a deliberately public appearance there. What Agent 43 reported next was the lie that mattered. Patton commanded 1st U.S. Army Group, FUSAG, an invasion force of 40 divisions preparing to assault Pas-de-Calais. FUSAG existed entirely in radio traffic and German imagination. The divisions were plywood and canvas. Patton's actual command, 3rd Army, waited in Western England for deployment to Normandy. But the Germans would never check. Couldn't check. Every agent they had in Britain was compromised. Every source was controlled. The entire intelligence picture they'd assembled of Allied strength came through channels MI5 orchestrated. The Germans were reading a novel and believing it was documentary footage. Garcia inserted a second sheet, typing Agent 43's request for more money. The fictional sergeant wanted £50 for this report, the greed making it sing with authenticity. Then he crafted a separate message from Agent 74, a fictional guard at an American supply depot, confirming unusual stockpiling activity consistent with invasion preparations. 2 independent sources, different personalities, corroborating details. The radio man would transmit both tonight. Madrid would receive them tomorrow. By week's end, Wehrmacht intelligence would incorporate them into strategic assessments. Divisions would move. Concrete would be poured for fortifications. Fuel would be allocated. All responding to information that existed only because a Spaniard in a London flat was a better fiction writer than most novelists. Harris crushed his cigarette. "The Normandy warning. You'll send it when?" "June 5th, late evening." Garcia had already composed it. An urgent message from Agent 72 about troop movements toward Portsmouth and Southampton. Accurate information about the real invasion. The timing was exquisite. Late enough that Germans couldn't respond. Early enough to prove Garbo's network functioned. The message would arrive after D-Day began. Delayed by a sleepy radio operator. The Germans would blame their own communications, never Garbo. What made the plan perfect? That failed warning would make every subsequent lie more believable. Garbo would tell them Normandy was a feint, that Patton's massive force still prepared to strike Calais. They'd believe him because he'd tried to warn them before and they'd failed to listen. Garcia sealed the messages in envelopes for the radio team. His hands were steady. 3 years of this, and he'd never wavered. Never broken character. Never let the weight of it, entire German divisions moving on his word, crack his concentration. "They'll recommend you for something after this," Harris said quietly. "After it's done." Garcia shrugged. The Germans had already awarded him the Iron Cross in absentia, a decoration he'd never see, but knew existed in some Abwehr file. He'd earned it by being their best source in Britain, by being their most trusted spy, by being the weapon they'd aimed at their own strategic planning. In Abbeville, Oberleutnant Klaus Becker would read summaries of these reports within days, Agent 43's observations about Dover reinforcing what his own reconnaissance had photographed. The intelligence would flow upward to von Roen's assessment teams, who would tally the phantom divisions, plot the ghost armies, mark Fusag's fictional units on situation maps with the same colored pins as real formations. The entire German intelligence apparatus, from field reconnaissance to high command analysis, was reading the same script. They'd cast themselves in a play without understanding someone else had written every line. Garcia stood, stretching cramped shoulders. Through the blackout curtains, he heard London living through its 5th year of war. Distant sirens, the rumble of trucks, someone's radio playing American jazz. Out there, real soldiers prepared for real invasion. In here, he fought with typewriter keys and imagination. The weapon that won wars, he'd learned, wasn't always the one that killed. Sometimes it was the one that made enemies defend against attacks that would never come, that froze armies in place guarding against ghosts, that transformed intelligence services into instruments of their own deception. He handed the envelopes to Harris. By morning, they'd be radio signals. By afternoon, German intercepts. By week's end, strategic reality for Wehrmacht planning staff, 1 man. 27 fictional agents. An entire phantom army group coming to life because the story was too perfect not to believe. The fluorescent lamps buzz overhead, casting harsh white light across the cluttered desk where Alexis von Roena has been working for 14 consecutive hours. His eyes burn. The Dover reconnaissance photos, Becker's latest haul, sprawl before him like accusatory evidence. Beside them, transcripts from the wireless intercept station at Lauf. Radio chatter between Fusag divisions coordinating amphibious assault training. Von Roena lifts one photograph, holding it close to the light. Sherman tanks in perfect formation along Dover's eastern docks. He counts them. 43 visible in this frame alone. His stomach tightens. Herr Oberst? His aide hovers in the doorway. Von Roena waves him off without looking up. The numbers won't balance. They've never balanced. Not since January, when the first reports arrived about Patton's appointment to Fusag command. Every week brings new divisions identified. Insignia photographed. Radio call signs logged. Movement orders intercepted. The British 2nd Airborne. The American 14th Army. Unit after unit, materializing across southeast England, like pieces of an enormous puzzle snapping into place. He pulls another sheet toward him. Garbo's Agent 43, reporting tank transporters moving through Dover at night, heading for marshalling areas near the coast. The detail is exquisite. Times, routes, unit markings, all cross-referenced with other sources. Von Roen has checked. Everything confirms. The wireless transcript catches his eye. Phantom to Quicksilver. Confirm Class 40. Bridge inventory for Exercise Zebra. He's seen this kind of traffic before. Engineering units coordinating for amphibious operations. Standard procedure. Authentic. What gnaws at him is the scale. Von Roena stands, joints popping after hours hunched over intelligence summaries. He walks to the wall map where colored pins mark Allied divisions. Red for confirmed, yellow for probable. The southeast coast of England bristles with pins like a rash. Dover, Canterbury, Margate, Ramsgate. All the ports and staging areas you'd need for the shortest crossing to France. to Calais. He begins counting pins, his finger moving systematically across the map. The 28th Infantry, the 55th, the 59th, the Phantom Scottish divisions that Garbo's network identified in April. Patton's own 3rd Army Corps. Each pin represents roughly 15,000 men. Tanks, artillery, supplies. His finger stops. He counts again, slower this time, cross-referencing with his master list. 47 divisions in Fusag alone. Add the confirmed forces in southwest England, the actual invasion armies that will surely be part of any cross-channel assault, and the number climbs to 89 Allied divisions total in Britain. 89. Von Roen's throat goes dry. He calculates quickly. 15,000 men per division. Multiply by 89. The number seems impossible. That's over 1 million combat troops, not counting logistics personnel, support staff, naval and air forces. But the evidence keeps coming. Yesterday, a Luftwaffe reconnaissance flight over Dover confirmed new landing craft in the harbor. Becker counted over 200 in his sector alone. This morning, Agent 74 reported seeing Patton himself reviewing troops near Canterbury. The general's ivory-handled pistols visible in the field glasses. Everything confirms. Von Roene returns to his desk, uncaps his pen. The intelligence assessment for Wehrmacht High Command is due by 0600. He writes carefully, each word weighted with the knowledge that Field Marshal von Rundstedt will read this, that Rommel will read this, that perhaps the Führer himself will see it. Analysis of current intelligence indicates Allied ground forces in Britain now total 89 divisions organized into 4 army groups. His hand cramps. He flexes his fingers, continues writing. Primary concentration remains southeastern England, consistent with assault preparations targeting Pas-de-Calais sector. General Patton's 1st U.S. Army Group, Fusag, comprises estimated 47 divisions in advanced readiness state. The pen scratches across paper. Outside, dawn begins breaking over the French countryside. Von Roene hasn't slept. He won't sleep. Not with this weight pressing down. He thinks of the 15th Army waiting at Calais. 19 divisions dug in along the coast, watching the narrowest part of the channel. Sufficient forces to meet an invasion, if the invasion comes where expected. But 89 divisions. Even the 15th Army can't hold against those numbers. Not if they all come at once. Von Roene pulls another file toward him. This one contains technical analysis of Allied shipping capacity, calculated from reconnaissance photos and agent reports. The mathematics are straightforward. Cargo tonnage, crossing times, turnaround rates. The British and Americans have assembled enough vessels to transport perhaps 30 divisions in the initial assault wave. 30 divisions hitting Calais simultaneously would be catastrophic. But it would leave 59 divisions still in England, ready for follow-on operations or... His pen stops mid-word. Or for a diversion. The thought arrives unwelcome. Von Roene sets down his pen, rubs his temples. He's too tired for this, too deep in the data to see clearly. But the logic follows. With 89 divisions, the Allies could afford to sacrifice an entire army group on a diversionary assault. Pin down German forces at some secondary location while the main blow falls elsewhere. Normandy, perhaps. The Brittany Peninsula. Even the Cotentin. But no. The evidence all points to Calais. Patton wouldn't command a diversion. He's their best armor general, the man they'd never waste on a feint. The Dover concentrations are too elaborate, too sustained to be theater. And Garbo's network has been reporting on Fusag preparations for months. The Germans have paid Garbo handsomely. His intelligence has always proven reliable. Von Roene picks up his pen again, dismisses the doubt. He's seeing shadows because he's exhausted. The simplest explanation. The Allies have assembled overwhelming force in southeast England for an overwhelming assault on the obvious target. Recommend maximum reinforcement of Pas-de-Calais defensive sectors. Fusag assault expected within 30 to 45 days of favorable weather and tide conditions. He signs the report, blots the ink carefully. His aide appears on cue to collect it for immediate transmission to Paris, to von Rundstedt's headquarters. As the man leaves, von Roen returns to the map. Those pins, so many pins. He counts them again, 89 divisions, and feels the weight of it crushing down like physical pressure. In fact, at this very moment, the actual number of Allied divisions in Britain is 52. Von Roen has invented 37 divisions that don't exist, units that live only in radio transmissions, in Garbo's agent reports, in photographs of inflatable tanks and plywood ships. He's conjured an entire Phantom Army group from sources he believes are German assets, but are actually British weapons pointed back at him. He doesn't know this, won't know it, can't know it. The evidence is too perfect, too consistent, too detailed to be fabricated. British intelligence would need total control of German espionage networks. Impossible. They'd need perfect knowledge of German wireless intercepts. Impossible. They'd need coordination across dozens of separate intelligence streams. Impossible. What von Roen doesn't understand, the British achieved all three impossibilities. Bletchley Park cracked the codes. MI5 turned every agent. And Garbo coordinated the fiction with such meticulous care that hardened intelligence professionals like von Roen build entire strategic assessments on foundations of theatrical smoke. The sun rises fully now, golden light streaming through the windows. Von Roen finally permits himself coffee, black and bitter. He sips it, standing at the map, studying those pins. Somewhere across the channel, the real Allied armies prepare for the real invasion. But von Roen stares at Dover, at Patton's phantom forces, at the ghost divisions he's convinced himself exist. The Germans will keep 19 divisions at Calais, waiting for an attack that will never come. They'll keep them there through June, through July, even after Normandy becomes undeniable. Because von Roen's analysis is too thorough, too well documented, too rational to disbelieve. He's built the perfect intelligence assessment from perfectly corrupted sources. The coffee tastes like ashes. The bunker at Wimereux, 5 miles north of Calais, smelled of stale coffee and diesel smoke. General Major Rudolf Hoffmann stood over the plotting table. June 7th grid lines scratched across northern France. His finger traced the Normandy coastline where red markers, Allied landings, had bloomed overnight like some grotesque infection. Normandy, his intelligence officer Hauptmann Dietrich said, sliding fresh intercepts across the table. But minimal armor, light infantry divisions mostly, no sign of Patton. Hoffmann finished the sentence. His jaw tightened. The overhead bulb swayed slightly from distant Allied bombing, shadows dancing across maps showing the massive concentration of Fusag divisions still massed at Dover. 89 Allied divisions total. Von Roen's latest assessment sat in Hoffmann's breast pocket, edges already softened from repeated readings. The door banged open. A signals corporal, face flushed, thrust a decoded message into Dietrich's hands. Garbo network transmission. Highest priority. Dietrich's eyes moved across the text. His face went pale. Herr General Major. Garbo reports. He swallowed. Normandy is the diversion. Agent 43 confirms Patton's Fusag still at Dover. Full strength. They're waiting for us to commit reserves to Normandy before launching the main assault here. Hoffmann took the paper. The words seemed to pulse under the weak light. Normandy operation designed to draw German reserves south. Fusag first wave, targeting Pas de Calais within 72 hours. Source reliable. Patton's Third Army at full readiness, Dover staging areas. Hoffmann's hands didn't shake. Years of Eastern Front combat had burned the tremors out of him. But something cold settled in his chest. Not fear exactly, more like standing in an avalanche's path watching the mountain come apart. Garbo has never been wrong. Hoffman heard himself saying it, believing it. The agent had warned them about Sicily, about Salerno, about Allied deception operations in the Mediterranean that saved German lives by being accurate. Garbo was the crown jewel, the source that made careers. Through the bunker's narrow window, he could see elements of the 15th Army, 2 full panzer divisions, 17 infantry divisions, coastal artillery that could turn the Strait of Dover into a killing ground. 19 divisions total. Enough firepower to shatter any landing within hours. Orders, sir? Hoffman looked at the maps. At Normandy, where fighting had been going on for 24 hours. At Dover, where Garbo's Phantom Army waited. The weight of decision pressed against his ribs like a physical thing. The 15th Army holds position, he said. Each word came out separately, distinctly. Maintain full readiness. This, he tapped Normandy, is exactly what Garbo warned us about. A feint to pull us out of position before the real blow. But sir, if Normandy expands, it won't. Hoffman cut him off. Look at the force composition. Where's Patton? Where's his armor? You don't invade France with second-rate divisions. You send your best, and their best is still at Dover. Dietrich nodded slowly. The logic was flawless. Patton commanded. Their respect. The one American general who understood mobile warfare, who'd humiliated them in Sicily. The Allies wouldn't waste him on a diversion. Over the next 3 weeks, the same scene replayed with variations. Different bunkers. Different officers. Always the same conclusion. June 10th. Allied forces in Normandy reached 326,000 troops. Hoffmann received updated Garbo intelligence confirming Fusag's Dover buildup intensifying. The 15th Army stayed at Calais. June 15th. The Bocage fighting turned savage. American and British divisions carved deeper into Norman hedgerows. Von Roene's latest assessment arrived. Garbo network reports Fusag assault imminent, possibly within days. Hoffmann ordered increased patrols along Calais beaches. His panzer divisions idled in reserve positions, engines warm, waiting. June 25th. Allied breakout from Normandy expanding. Cherbourg lost. Over 600,000 Allied troops now on French soil. At morning briefing, a young staff officer, Oberleutnant Werner, placed a different assessment on Hoffmann's desk. Sir, I've been analyzing the pattern. Werner's voice carried the dangerous certainty of someone who hadn't learned when to stay quiet. Every Garbo report has been accurate about timing, but consistently wrong about scale. The Dover concentrations, if we compare aerial reconnaissance across time, the equipment doesn't actually move. It just sits there. And Patton, we have confirmed sightings of him at Dover, but also reports of Third Army elements in Western England, near. Enough. Hoffman didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Garbo's network has provided actionable intelligence for 3 years. You're suggesting our best source is compromised based on what? Photographic analysis of staging areas that are deliberately camouflaged. Werner opened his mouth, closed it. The overhead light caught the sheen of sweat on his forehead. The British would need to have turned our entire intelligence apparatus, Hoffman continued, his tone almost gentle. Every agent, every network. They'd need to have cracked our codes, identified our sources, and fed us coordinated disinformation for years. Do you understand how impossible that is? How many moving parts that requires? Werner nodded slowly, deflating. Garbo warned us about Normandy 6 hours before it happened. His radio operator failed to pass the message in time. But Garbo knew. He tried to warn us. Hoffman tapped the stack of previous assessments. An agent who predicts operations doesn't get that kind of tactical detail unless he's genuine. July 1st. American forces reached Coutances. British pushed toward Caen. Allied strength in Normandy. 850,000 troops. The numbers arrived on Hoffman's desk each morning like a rising fever chart. At afternoon briefing, Dietrich placed the latest intelligence summary down quietly. His hand lingered on the paper. Garbo network has gone quiet, he said. No reports for 48 hours. Hoffman felt it then, the first real crack. Not in his faith in Garbo, in something deeper, like standing on ice and hearing it groan. Technical issues, he said. Allied bombing of relay stations, perhaps. But that night, alone in his quarters, Hoffman spread the maps again. Traced force movements with his finger. The Allies had landed 850,000 men in Normandy, the largest amphibious invasion in history. They'd built entire artificial harbors, the Mulberries, towed across the Channel. They'd established complete air superiority. They'd begun breakout operations. And Patton's Fusag, the force that supposedly dwarfed Normandy, had done nothing. 72 hours, Garbo had said on June 7th. Then a week. Then imminent. Then silence. Hoffman poured himself schnapps. His hands still didn't shake, but the cold in his chest had spread, settled into his bones like November frost. July 7th. The order came from OKW, Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, highest command, marked urgent. Hoffman read it twice, then a third time. 10th Army, release 2 panzer divisions to Normandy front. Assessment, Normandy primary operation. Calais threat assessed as reduced probability. Reduced probability, not eliminated, not exposed as fiction, just reduced. Hoffman walked to the window. Outside, panzer crews prepared vehicles for the move south. Maintenance they'd performed weekly for a month while waiting for the invasion that matched their fears perfectly. That made tactical sense. That vindicated every choice. Dietrich appeared in the doorway. He held a folder, unmarked, which meant it came from somewhere unofficial. Sir, you should see this. The folder contained Werner's complete analysis. Photographic comparisons showing Dover tank formations that never changed position across 6 weeks. Radio traffic analysis suggesting transmitter locations that shouldn't be possible given the reported unit movements. Agent reports that matched too perfectly. Described exercises that followed German doctrine too precisely, as if someone was telling them what they wanted to hear. At the bottom, a single typewritten page. Werner's conclusion. The British have been running us. For years. Every agent, every source, everything we think we know about Allied capabilities is exactly what they wanted us to know. Garbo's warning about Normandy, 6 hours late, was deliberate. To prove his credibility for the big lie that followed. Normandy was never the diversion. Calais was. Hoffman read it standing up. When he finished, he placed the folder carefully on his desk. Looked at Dietrich. Where's Werner now? He disappeared this morning, sir. Before the OKW order arrived. I think he knew. Knew what? That we'd bury this. Because if he's right, if this is all true, then we've spent 2 months defending against ghosts while real armies invaded France. Hoffman sat down heavily. Through the window, the last panzer division rumbled south toward the real war, to Kiniti. Late. 7 weeks too late. The schnapps bottle stood on his desk. He poured 2 glasses, handed one to Dietrich. To Garbo, Hoffman said quietly. Whatever the truth is, whoever he really works for, he's the most effective intelligence operative this war has produced. They drank. The alcohol burned. Outside, the empty gun emplacements faced Dover across the strait, waiting for an invasion that would never come. In that moment, Hoffman understood. Not with proof. Proof would take decades to emerge, but with the sick certainty that comes from adding numbers that don't balance. The Allies hadn't just beaten them. They'd convinced them to beat themselves. Somewhere in England, real or imagined, Garbo was probably writing, "The palace chamber held its breath." Sunlight slanted through tall windows, striping the parquet floor where Juan Pujol Garcia stood at attention. King George VI approached, the member of the Order of the British Empire suspended from blue ribbon in his hands. The medal touched Garcia's chest. Cool, substantial, undeniable. He already owned another medal. The Iron Cross. Second class. Hitler's signature on the citation. One for telling the truth. One for lying perfectly. Garcia held still as the king stepped back, the ceremony's formality washing over him like water over stone. Around him, other recipients shifted in their best uniforms, proud of courage displayed on battlefields, in bombers over Germany, aboard destroyers in the Atlantic. His battlefield had been a typewriter in Hendon. His weapons, 27 people who never existed. The king said something about service. Garcia nodded, mind elsewhere. He was remembering June 7th, 1944, 24 hours after Normandy. The message he'd sent to Madrid. Urgent, highest priority. Warning that the invasion was a diversion. That Patton's massive force would strike Calais any day now. Imagining the German officers reading it, the relief flooding through them. We were right to hold position. Garbo confirms the main attack is still coming. 19 divisions, 2 panzer units, all frozen at Calais, defending against phantoms, while real Allied troops bled and died 70 miles south to secure beachheads that would never have survived if those panzers had rolled. Mr. Garcia? An aide gestured toward the reception line. He moved through handshakes, accepting congratulations from men who knew only fragments of what he'd done. Security, even now. The Germans still believed he'd died of malaria in Angola. Let them keep believing. Some Nazi true believers might harbor grudges sharp enough to cross decades. Venezuela, 1984. The cafe in Caracas hummed with afternoon traffic noise, ceiling fans stirring humid air. Garcia, white-haired now, 72 years old, sat across from the BBC journalist, watching the young man's tape recorder spin. "When did you know it had worked?" the journalist asked. Garcia sipped his coffee, considering. "I never knew. Not during the war. I sent messages, received payments, listened to my handlers praise my network's accuracy. But whether German divisions actually moved, whether anyone died because of words I typed, that remained abstract. Until Tommy Harris told me, after the war. The 15th Army stayed at Calais through June, through July. Waiting." Garcia's hands, still steady, rested on the table. 250,000 Allied troops in Normandy, and the Germans still believed it was a feint. The journalist leaned forward. "Did you feel guilt?" Garcia smiled faintly. "You want to know if I felt guilty for deceiving them so thoroughly?" "Something like that." "I felt satisfaction." Garcia's voice hardened slightly. The Germans believed their intelligence was superior, their analysis unmatched. They believed totalitarian efficiency would crush democratic chaos. Instead, a Spanish chicken farmer with a typewriter paralyzed their entire strategic reserve. He paused, remembering the absurdity of it. Agent 43, the fictional American sergeant, demanding £50 for his reports. Agent 74, the supply clerk who supposedly had gambling debts. 27 invented people with complete backstories, families, motivations, flaws. He'd created them all from nothing, maintained them for years, and the Germans, with their vaunted intelligence apparatus, never suspected. "The Abwehr paid me in pounds sterling," Garcia continued. "Sent via Lisbon. I used German money to fund British intelligence operations. That irony pleased me enormously." The tape spun in silence for a moment. "Your network," the journalist said carefully. "When was the last time you embodied them? Thought as them?" Garcia looked out the window at Caracas traffic, the question pulling him somewhere unexpected. "I still do. Sometimes. Walking here, I wondered what Agent 43 would make of Venezuela. He was mercenary, pragmatic. He'd probably start another black market operation. A dry laugh. You spend years becoming 27 people. Some part of them stays. Hamburg, 1985. The reunion filled a beer hall with elderly men. Their once crisp uniforms, now distant memories. Former 15th Army Calais garrison. Veterans who'd spent June and July 1944 watching empty horizons while Normandy burned. Heinrich Brandt, artillery observer, age 63, read from the declassified British report someone had translated. His hands shook slightly, not from age, from recognition. Garbo Network, he read aloud. 27 sub-agents, all fictional. Double agent controlled by MI5 from 1941 forward. Every report deliberately falsified to support Allied deception operations. Someone dropped a beer stein. The crack of glass on stone floor punctuated the silence. Fictional, Brandt repeated. Not one real source, not one actual agent. Everything we believed about Dover, about Patton's army group, about the main invasion still coming, lies. Perfect lies. Werner Schultz, former Panzer lieutenant, spoke from the back. We sat there, engines ready, fuel loaded. 7 weeks. His voice carried no anger, only a kind of exhausted wonder. My driver kept asking when we'd move south. I told him to trust command, trust intelligence. We had the best agent network in Britain, I said. Garbo himself confirmed Normandy was a diversion. Garbo, someone muttered. Scheisse. Brandt found the passage he'd been looking for. Juan Pujol Garcia, Spanish national, operated from London suburb, created entirely fictional spy network using public information, theater maps, train schedules. He looked up. He invented an entire American army group. We believed him. The silence stretched longer this time. How many? A voice asked. How many divisions did we keep at Calais? 19, Schultz said quietly. 2 Panzer, 17 infantry, against an invasion that existed only in radio signals and rubber tanks. An older man, Oberst, rank insignia still visible on his worn jacket, stood slowly. I want to meet him. Heads turned. Not to... The colonel searched for words. Not revenge. I want to understand. How does one man fool an entire Wehrmacht intelligence apparatus? How do you invent 27 people convincingly enough that trained analysts stake German strategy on their reports? Brandt shuffled papers. He's alive. Venezuela. The British kept him hidden for decades, claimed he'd died, just revealed his identity last year. Write him? Someone suggested. Ask. The colonel nodded slowly, something like respect creeping into his weathered face. Yes. Ask the man who defeated us without firing a shot how he did it. The letter arrived 6 months later. Garcia opened it at his regular cafe table, surprised to see German postmark, Hamburg return address. He read carefully, the colonel's handwriting precise, despite evident age. We held position because we believed you. This is not accusation, but observation. Your network's reports fit every pattern we expected. Reluctant sources, specific details, occasional gaps suggesting genuine operational security. You understood us better than we understood ourselves. Military historians say creativity won the war as much as production. I spent 40 years believing we lost to American factories. Your existence suggests we lost to something more fundamental, imagination coupled with freedom to employ it. Were you trained in theater? Psychology? How does one sustain 27 distinct personalities for years without error? Garcia read it twice, then pulled out writing paper. His response, carefully composed, ended with a single paragraph that would be framed in that Hamburg beer hall for decades. You ask how one man deceived German intelligence. The answer, I didn't deceive you. I gave you exactly what you wanted to see, and you deceived yourselves. The totalitarian mind demands certainty, seeks confirming patterns, trusts, systems over instinct. I simply provided the pattern your system required. The 15th Army didn't defend against my reports. It defended against its own expectations. London, 1988. The Imperial War Museum unveiled its new exhibit, Operation Fortitude and the D-Day Deception. Glass cases held rubber tank fragments, radio equipment used to broadcast Phantom Army communications, photographs of the plywood fleet at Dover. Center stage, a small placard displaying two medals side by side. The Iron Cross, the MBE, both earned by Juan Pujol Garcia, both real. Both for exactly opposite services, a school child, perhaps 10 years old, pressed close to the glass. How can the same person get medals from both sides? Her teacher smiled. Because he was loyal to both. Loyal to Germany's need for certainty. Loyal to Britain's need for deception. He served both masters perfectly. But which side was he really on? The teacher considered. The side that understood war could be won through imagination. The side that trusted one creative man over entire bureaucracies. The side that proved lies, told perfectly, could immobilize armies more effectively than bombs. The girl studied the medals, trying to reconcile the contradiction. Outside, London traffic hummed. Inside, the rubber tank fragments sat silent. Theater props that had reshaped European history. Creative deception that had saved tens of thousands of lives by preventing German reinforcements from reaching Normandy in time to matter. Garcia never attended the exhibit opening. He remained in Venezuela, maintaining the fiction of his own death for a few more years. The last deception in a career built entirely on making people believe what wasn't there. But the medals spoke for him. Two honors. Same man. Different truths. The war's final irony. The greatest intelligence victory of 1944 came not from cracking codes or aerial reconnaissance, but from understanding that what people believe shapes reality more powerfully than what actually exists. 27 fictional agents, one real man, an entire German army defending against ghosts. The medals caught the museum light, gleaming proof that sometimes the most devastating weapon is simply a story, perfectly told.